It's 1945, and the wind is blowing hard across the rails of the ship. The Pacific has always made it difficult to get a good shot, but that's why he's the head of photography here on the USS Lexington. He's good at what he does, and he's able to document some of the reactions of the crew to the news that the war is finally over. After years of conflict, more than 2,000 men aboard that ship are contemplating what might come next. Some celebrate, some go on about their day wondering if it's really over. But he, the photographer, he knows what it means for him. It's his chance to finally return home to Connecticut, to the house he built shortly before the war began, when he had transplanted a tiny serviceberry seedling to the edge of a pond in an act of faith in the future. You're listening to Plant Connection. Life today can feel overwhelming, like we've drifted away from its natural rhythm. This podcast is your space to slow down, breathe, and rediscover the peace and clarity that come from reconnecting with the natural world. I'm your host, Lisa Cutshaw. Let's reconnect, one plant at a time. It's amazing to me that serviceberries aren't more well known. This time of the spring, they make themselves hard to miss. They have beautiful white flowers in April and May, similar in timing to dogwood, though each individual flower is much smaller and has 5 petals. Serviceberry is in the rose family, so if you can picture maybe an apple blossom or a blackberry flower, you'll be in the right ballpark for what a serviceberry flower looks like. Its petals are skinnier than those other flowers, though. Now imagine a 20-some foot tall multi-stem tree covered in bazillions of those tiny little white flowers, and you'll have a good idea of what serviceberry looks like this time of year. It's lovely, and it's one of those trees that feel homey and comfortable. It's kind of like the friend we always love when we see them, but don't always appreciate as much as we should. Seriously, what's not to love? A cloud of white flowers in spring, a crop of delicious berries in summer, and a home and food source for lots of animals and insects and tiny critters we don't even notice. Those early blooming white flowers, showing up before any of the woodland trees have leafed out, provide a crucial food source for native pollinator insects, including some of the earliest bees and wasps to be actively out and about in the countryside. Come summer, the berries are a favorite food source for dozens of species of birds, like cedar waxwings and gray catbirds, along with many more mammals, like black bear and red squirrels and white-tailed deer. I haven't seen any serviceberry growing near my house, so I'm considering planting some. There's a big herd of deer that like to live in the woods above our house, not to mention a family of at least 6 black bear. I don't like to put things out that will draw the black bear close to the house, like say a bird feeder might. So I plant things a little further away that can give the birds and the bears all they need in the way nature intended. Some people suggest that planting a serviceberry is a way to give the wildlife something to focus on so they'll leave your other plants alone. Like, maybe plant a serviceberry so the critters won't eat your blueberries. It might work. We'll see. With as many animals as there are around here, though, I suspect they'd be happy to nibble on both. Now, you may find yourself saying, serviceberry? I've never even heard of it. And if that's the case, you are not alone. You may be like me when I first heard that name back in college, thinking it was something completely new to me, only to find out I had heard of it, but by a different common name, juneberry. There are others, lots of others it turns out. Many people call it by the genus name of Amelanchier, or maybe you know it as shadblow or shadbush. Yeah, that one's pretty weird, but we'll get back to that in a minute. All of those common names have something in common. They all speak to ways that serviceberries have been interwoven into our lives and culture over time. They speak to our relationship with the tree, and they relate to a certain kind of timekeeping that we don't necessarily relate to anymore. In most cases, the names describe something about the time of year that serviceberry metaphorically raises its hand and says, "Hey, notice me." So let's look at those names one at a time. Serviceberry itself. I initially assumed it came from how much it offers to all of us, year in and year out. But it turns out that common name has a very different source. Back in the day, before technology decoupled us from the rhythms of the seasons, winter had a big effect on how life was lived. Snow and frozen ground and generally crummy weather put a lot of things on hold through the winter. In some areas, frozen ground meant graves couldn't be dug, and the blooming of the serviceberry was a sign that things were thawing out enough to again offer funeral services. Another version of that I've heard is that out in the country areas, church services would be offered by traveling preachers who found it difficult to get to the more remote areas when the winter weather was bad. So here again, the blooming of the serviceberry was a sign that church services could again be held. Great. So what about shadblow? Now some of you are probably as puzzled as I was, while others are shaking their heads and saying, she does not know much about fish, does she? It's true. I had never heard of shad before. But yes, it is a type of fish. They're native along the east coast of the U.S. in rivers in the coastal plain and into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And they are a type of herring. So what do they have to do with amelanchier trees? In the springtime, the shad migrate from the ocean into freshwater rivers to spawn. And the blooming of the amelanchiers, or shadblow, or shadbush, whatever you want to call it, mark the time in spring when the shad are running. Excellent. We're cruising through these common names. The next one is probably the most self-explanatory. Juneberry. Unlike serviceberry, where the word service spoke to the time when the tree flowered, and berry spoke to the fact that it does eventually get berries, but at a different time of year, Juneberry is straightforward. You will in fact find the berries on amelanchiers in June and stretching into July. The berries are red for a while, and then they turn more purple once they're ripe. Now there are several different species within the amelanchier genus, and people have different reactions to the flavor of the berries. Some are bland, while others are tangy and sweet, almost like a tangerine. In my research, I came across a claim that those berries could be used in all the same ways you'd use blueberries. Now that's a claim I can't wait to test. If you see me out gathering berries off a small blue-green leaf tree come June and July, well, you'd better come with, because that sounds like good eating. But let's get back to that intrepid photographer. Stationed on a ship in the Pacific and thinking of the serviceberry seedling he had transplanted back on his farm years before. That man was Edward Steichen, a luminary in the world of 20th century photography. He was not new to the life of a photographer in wartime, having also served in World War I. Born in Luxembourg, Steichen lived in France after World War I and eventually came to the U.S., establishing the New York Gallery where Picasso was introduced to American audiences. In 1929, he purchased land in Connecticut and transplanted that seedling, less than a foot tall at the time. By the time he built a house on the land, that serviceberry tree was 25 feet tall. Imagine being at war on the other side of the world with thoughts of a humble farm to ground you. That, I think, is one of the great gifts nature offers us, the ability to give us a sense of place, to ground us, even when we're caught up in human events we cannot control. Like, a war maybe. Steichen continued his relationship with that serviceberry tree for the rest of his life. How do we know that? Well, he spent years doing a photographic study of the tree, taking pictures and even movie film of it from every angle, at every time of day, eventually making it a daily ritual he would go through, even after age and infirmity meant he had to have his camera mounted on a special rig that would roll out onto the deck of his house along with his chair. Steichen went on to do many memorable things after World War II. He served as the director of photography at the Museum of Modern Art, and he staged one of the most successful photography exhibitions of the 20th century. Titled The Family of Man, it showed photographs of ordinary people from around the world, and the catalog of that exhibition sold millions of copies and is still in print today. I'm going to quote from a newspaper article that was published after Steichen's death, when part of his farm was donated to the Connecticut Audubon Society. The article appeared in the Bennington Banner on November 24, 1973, under the byline, Rink Buck. Quote, he also confessed to being transfixed at times by the symmetry and universal symbolism of nature. Now that quote's talking about Steichen himself. He confessed to being transfixed by the symmetry and universal symbolism of nature. Now for me, there's a nice mirroring there. His vocation as a photographer allowed him to recognize the connections between us and nature, and also between people, between each of us and each other. And symbolically, the serviceberry fits beautifully into that. It offers so much to the world. Beauty, food, a sense of grounding in the cycles of the seasons, a sense of hope that spring has come again after the harsh conditions of winter, and maybe even that peace can come again after the horrors of war. What a joy it is to be part of a world where plants and animals, and people too, can evolve to help each other and not just protect themselves. I'd be remiss if I talked about serviceberry without mentioning the wonderful book by Robin Wall Kimmerer that came out in fall of 2024. It doesn't feel right to dress up my podcast with her beautiful prose, at least not without asking her permission first, which I haven't done. So I'll just say, read the book. You can thank me later. It's called The Serviceberry: Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World. So if you're out and about and see a small tree covered in a cloud of tiny white flowers, well, you may well be looking at an invasive Bradford pear. But if you're lucky, it will be a serviceberry. And if you have Bradford pears and want to replace them with a native tree that's just as beautiful, serviceberry is an excellent option. Let's start planting them far more often so we can show a little appreciation for all the beauty and community it offers us. Until next time, remember to talk to your plants. Thank you for joining me on this journey back to nature with Plant Connection. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to tap subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss the next episode. See you next time.